to Coffee Talk, and this is coming out on March 31st. I say that not to intimidate you or scare you, but just because now you've got a reference point. If you go back and you look at these and. Right off the top, no, we're not doing musical pastors. It's not like there's a magical number of spots here and whoever gets to them first gets in. Kevin's away on holidays this week, and I was last week. You were the week before, Jeff.
Yeah.
So I spent the week in a tropical paradise. I did, absolutely. It's a little place called Main Island. It's in the heart of the Salish Sea.
And that's not the Main Island, like it's...
Mayne. Right. And let me tell you, my phone hates it when I try and spell it. And every time it autocorrects, I'm like, no, it's not Maybe Island. It's Maine. And so anyways, all that aside, we had a great week with family there and a ridiculous amount of houseplants. It's funny, I go from preaching with an opening about houseplants, and then I get there that night, I'm like, there is houseplants everywhere. So it's my in-laws, so like Sheena's grandfather's place, but her sister and husband live there on the island because, that's where they're working and living right now. And houseplants are like one of his things. And so there's houseplants everywhere. Wow. It was beautiful. It was really, I would sit by the window, I would stare out at the ocean, and I would have just this like tower of like houseplants next to me and heat lamps. It was very lovely.
Did you feel like you just got rejuvenated with the fresh air and everything? All that.
Well, so here's the thing though. I am allergic to pets, and they have a dog and 3 cats. Oh. So there was no amount of, and it was chilly and rainy. So if I had opened the door and been like, oh, fresh air, it'd been better. But so it wasn't really the let's see, pristine air quality. Yeah. And then here's the thing. I went down to the basement when my mother-in-law got there. She's like, hey, could we change the furnace filters? Mm-hmm. No big deal. And I go down, and they had installed one of the furnaces is fairly new, and the filter in it wasn't that old. But I'm pulling it out, and I've changed my home furnace filters. We do it like a couple times a year, usually. Once if it's not, but with the smoke and stuff, we typically do it fall and spring. And so I know how to do this. I'm pulling out the filter, and it got snagged, and it like as I got it like just exploded right in my face. And in the basement, where like it's like a really deep crawl space, like picture a crawl space, but you don't have to crawl. Yeah. And so I'm standing there, and so the furnace actually is at my head height. So I'm pulling it out right here, and as the filter gets here, it explodes, and I just take this face full of pet hair and dust, and I'm just like, oh my goodness. It was a rough
for a couple weeks.
I already had that because of the allergies, and I'm popping out, like I'm taking an allergy pill daily, and I'm still like itchy from head to toe. But anyways. And then I left the filter out because I'm like, they should see how dirty. It was like it's grayer than this carpet. It was just. Anyways, all that is. So I guess it got a little better after that, but it's good. It was great. Again, the best part was we spent time with family. I thought that was great. It wasn't so great for one of the houseplants because I'm trying to think how old this nephew was. Is he 2? Is he 1? Came along and like just it snapped the top right off the tree. So that was a rough moment for my brother-in-law who like that tree was one of his babies.
Favorites,
and so it's trying to reroute. But anyways, we saw a couple times like pods of orcas went by out front of the house. That was pretty cool. Again, lots of time with family. Got to do some hikes. There's a fairly, it's not Mount Boucherie high, but there's a decent mountain on the middle of the island. And we hiked up it one night for sunset, and
oh, that's great.
Well, it would have been great if there was actually a sunset. I mean, the sun went down, and it was like just gray the whole time. We're like, nice and but it was pretty cool. It was pretty great. So, yes, we're back, and it's. Well, I'm back. I say we, but really, Sheena and the kids. You and I are. Sheena and the kids, they're still there. They're like, we're not done with hanging out with people. We see. They said we see you enough. So you want to see other people? Well, that's understandable. It's spring break. Okay, hang out with cousins.
Well, and you told me that by the end of spring break,
if everything goes according to the plan, like if they all work out, my kids will see every single one of their cousins, both biological and like adoptive cousins. You know how like, because we have a really close friends that my kids call, you know, auntie and uncle, and they think of their kids as cousins. So they'll even see them. They'll see like everybody. If you're a cousin to my kids, they're going to hang out. So that's great. That's why it's actually really easy for me to be like, yeah, stay, like hang out with family. That doesn't happen very often. Right. It's awesome. So it's good.
That's great. So do people need to know to, you know, call you and love you?
I am a very, you know what I did all last week? I was like chief barista and cook. And this is actually part survival strategy because when like
it can be away from
no, it's not even that because the kitchen is like, you know, tinier than like Lori's workspace. Like that, if the kitchen there was that big, that would be a dream. It's like not even half that. And so it's not really a way. It's not. But what it is because you don't want to see me when I'm hungry, and so if I'm making dinner every night, then I know that it's not going to be like at 8 o'clock, and it can be more. Maybe that's just a weird control thing. But again, one morning I wasn't on breakfast. Except for me, I'm up at 7 and I'm just like, I gotta eat now. So I ate a little something because I'm like, I know that there's gonna be a breakfast made later. It's gonna be awesome. I don't want to be full. I want to be a part of that. But I ate a little something and then like an hour later, still not even close to having breakfast. So I'm like, I gotta have breakfast number 2. So I did the full Hobbit thing that day. I had 3 breakfasts and it was purely survival. That's it.
And all that.
No, it was beautiful. But then again, I'm making like pour over coffees like all day. It was awesome. It was really fun. And then we're just like sitting out, hanging out, and being there.
So you're kind of on vacation now too, because now you just get to relax away from all the chaos.
Yeah, in a way. It's like I went home last night and I'm like, wait a minute, I am by myself.
Yeah. What's going on?
Dude. But it was beautiful. Anyways, trusting that you guys are having a great spring break, even if that means nothing to you. If you're like, I don't have kids, I'm not in part of the school thing. It's spring and it's double-digit weather.
The sun has been out too, like maybe not right now, but it was out yesterday when we were.
It's glorious. It's absolutely beautiful. I'm watching the greenery come up in the yard, and I actually looked at my grass. When I left, it was like still kind of brown, but yesterday I'm like, it's green. Yeah. Anyways, it's awesome. So some things, church, that not weather related that you need to be aware of is that it is the first Sunday of April this week, so that we're celebrating communion. So if you're with us in person, we'll be taking communion together. If you're at home or wherever you are, we invite you to participate virtually and prepare elements so that you can be participating at a distance. But I'd love to see you here. And for our service at 10 o'clock, we'll be doing communion together. And this is Easter month, right? So we actually end up doing communion a couple times, which is awesome because we've got there's the Good Friday service coming up, and I believe communion will be part of that. That's going to be at Emmanuel and I can't even remember what day Good Friday is. April the...
Oh, I don't remember the date.
Oh boy, sorry. I'll put it in the notes below, or maybe I'll just flash it across the screen. That's where we do the Chris forgot the thing, and then we update it. But we'll put it in there. So that Good Friday the service is at Emmanuel. If you want to come, we're going to be there. It's going to be great. And then Easter Sunday service here. But I believe I'm hearing rumors. So I went for holidays and things were like, normal, no plans really in place. And I come back and there's plans, but they're still not firm. So we can't say everything, but we can say that it will be different, right? Yeah. It will be Sunday morning. It will be here. And I'm hearing that we might be around tables. Like it'll be a little more kind of community, sort of get to know your neighbor kind of thing as we worship together. And I think we're still waiting for the fellowship committee to kind of, we have other people involved in this, and so we haven't sorted out all of the pieces of the puzzle just yet, but we want you to know as soon as possible what that will be, because we recognize that might still be uncomfortable for some people, right? Like there might be food, can we say that? There's some food around the table.
But it will be COVID safe, and
in its preparation, right? And some of you just might Hey, some of you, you're longing for an opportunity to sit down at a table and share a meal with your brothers and sisters. And we recognize for some, you just might not be there yet. And so we want you to be aware of it so that you can choose for what fits your comfort level. We don't want anyone to come here and be awkward and be like, I'm not okay.
Yeah,
you know,
like you
have those, right, if you didn't know and you're sitting there and you're going, we want you to come, whether you're here or at home, to be at peace and be able to worship fully. That's our goal. And so we know that there's a lot of us have been really craving that connection with others. And so we want to incorporate that in our worship on the Sunday.
It's a celebration, the risen Jesus, and we want to do that together, excited together, and have fellowship and worship. And,
absolutely. And meals are such it's interesting how Jesus takes advantage of them in so many key ways, right? You can think of the miracle, the feeding miracles, right? We think of the Last Supper. We think of like he's having dinner when he's anointed. He's having dinner when there's teaching moments. He's having there's so much happens around a table. Even I think, if you look at even how John wraps his gospel, he ends up with breakfast, right? And so we're going to incorporate some of that into Easter Sunday morning. And so we were sure you'll have questions, and next week we'll have a lot more answers, hopefully, to be able to say about that. Maybe there's not much more to say than just we'll have breakfast. But
it won't be like a huge breakfast buffet thing, but there will be like continental.
So if you're like me, have a first breakfast at home. Because by tensies, right? Because by 10 o'clock, it's like, the blood sugar is really low. And you know what? I say that about myself. I am not the only person I know intimately well who's exactly the same way. We have a 7:30 rule. I have a 7:30 rule at home, and I'm picturing right now someone I love very dearly, and if they have not eaten by if it's 7:29 and they don't have a bowl of cereal.
I've been here after school, and there are certain people that need.
There's 240s. 240s, isn't it? It's like right after school. It's get thee to a snack, and it's good. Yeah. Anyway, so that's Easter. It's coming. It's Easter weekend. We've got a couple of ways to worship together. Invite you to that. I feel, Jeff, like there's a third. Oh, I know what the third thing was. It took me a moment. May Camp, May Long Weekend is just around the corner, and so if you are a teenager, like in that grade 7 and grade 12 zone, you are invited to come to a retreat with us down at Green Bay. And I won't get a whole lot of details on that on this because we recognize probably the people watching this are not teenagers. But you can connect with me about more information on that, how to sign up and all of that. It's not just our church. It's something really cool that we do with a number of association churches.
Well, this is where you and I kind of knew each other.
This is where we met was May Camp way back. Yeah. But we've got a youth group coming down from Terrace and a couple from Prince George and from the Lower Mainland and us, and we kind of get together in this sort of central location. Terrace would probably argue with that, but sort of central location where we can actually be communal together, and we're going to spend a weekend together in the beautiful Okanagan sunshine, and it's awesome. It's always fun, and but the early registration deadline, in other words, if you want to save $10, you got to sign up by Easter. And so that's why we're letting you know about that today. So if you've got a kid in that zone, or even if you're I don't know, maybe you have a niece or nephew that's sort of connected and you think they would really come talk to me. We'll see. It'd be great to have them. So I want to make sure that you're aware of that. And then as we've been doing lately, often we want to sort of reflect back on the sermon that we shared in last Sunday. And kind of take the conversation a little further. So, Jeff, I understand you've got a question for us to respond to this morning, and maybe that'll prompt some further thinking. Yeah. Well, and I noticed you went and got your sermon notes. Yeah, as if you didn't quite remember what you preached on. But
I wanted to get the question right.
Yeah, sure.
So in our sermon series on Mark, which we both preached part of, we keep bumping into this question: who do you say Jesus is? Mark wants us to wrestle with that, and right in the middle, he comes out and asks his own disciples that. Right. But till now, Mark has been presenting with how he presents Jesus. And so I reference 1 Peter 2 on Sunday. And 1 Peter 2 talks about how Jesus is a precious cornerstone to some and a stumbling block to others. The same person, the same thing can be both beautiful and something that gets in the way. How do you make sense of that? How do you think about that?
I think Peter's not the only one who presents a very similar idea. I think, so, okay, full disclosure, Jeff gave me the questions yesterday, and I just wasn't sure which one we were going to talk about. So I have been thinking about this. I think sometimes what Peter does, and as I even referenced, likely Peter's a major influence to Mark, right? So I think it's great that you went there with Peter's writings because this is probably very much, Mark is very much influenced.
Yeah.
So I think Peter has this tendency to keep things short, like almost maybe, I don't know if it's that he's writing to a different audience than Paul often was, but he just sort of like quotes the prophets and then gives no context.
Mark does?
Peter, specifically, like Peter and Mark, right? Like I think Peter does that. Paul, I think when he talks about how like the wisdom of God is foolishness, right? And that, like he kind of goes into this, he unpacks the metaphor.
Yeah.
I think Peter just sort of drops the metaphor and then says, you know it.
Yeah.
And we're supposed to understand it, but we don't. And I don't know if that's because he's writing to a different audience. I often think of Peter as like the ADD apostle, and I think he just like does stuff and moves on. And I realized as I was thinking about that yesterday, as I was walking, my brain flashed to, I've done that. I don't know if you've done this. There's definitely emails I've written where I go, I'm bored of this, I'm just going to send it. And then I look at it afterwards, or the person comes back and says, hey, what did you mean here? And I realized I didn't explain it. I think Peter did that with his letters a little bit. It doesn't mean it's not true. I just think that how I approach Jesus, for me, I'm not tripped up by what he said and does. But I know a lot of people who are. Or I almost wonder if today in our culture, it's not so much what Jesus said and does, it's how people represent what Jesus said and did. And that seems to be a little more trippy. I think because you were talking about the light and the lampstand and hiding it. Yeah. I think that's what, I think if the world saw more of just the pure light, maybe it wouldn't be so trippy. And such a stumbling block, it'd be a little easier to accept. Maybe not, right? Because certainly Satan doesn't, he tries to hide the light.
And we saw that with Jesus. Yeah. He was a stumbling block to the Pharisees, right? Like, so, there's a element of both. Yeah.
So I think a lot of things changes in the course of time, right? And I even tried to sort of touch on this a little bit in my sermon. Pre-resurrection, I think everything was a stumbling block, right? Peter seemed to understand that he was the Messiah, but I don't think Peter knew what he meant by that. Like if Jesus was going to push the issue, I bet you Peter couldn't articulate it the way he could Acts 2, right? When he gets up and preaches.
When he's filled with the Spirit.
He's then filled with the Spirit. Post-resurrection, post-Jesus ascension, when they're actually filled with the Holy Spirit, then all of a sudden, that's when it makes sense. Now, does someone have to have the Spirit before Jesus stops becoming a stumbling block? No, I don't. That's not what I'm trying to say. But I think
the Spirit's working though.
Maybe, and some people have, and I forget who has articulated this really well, but sometimes people talk about the Spirit working on versus the Spirit working in. And I think sometimes, that's not my original idea. I want to be clear about that. That's smarter people than me. And I think we see that a lot. And maybe that's when things change. So yes, Jesus is a stumbling block for a lot of people for a lot of time. But as the Spirit works away on the outside, then at some point a light goes on. And you see Jesus different. And so it took Peter, how often do they reflect, I forget which of the gospel writers comment on the fact that right at the ascension, it says they all worship, but some doubted. And so even in that moment, there's that struggle between, is Jesus stumbling block or is he cornerstone? They're working it out.
Yeah.
And Peter also talks about working out your faith, right? And so I think there's a lot going on in that process. And we maybe don't have enough grace for people who see Jesus just as stumbling block because they just haven't gotten to the point yet where he's cornerstone.
Yeah, I was kind of pondering that too, and you brought it up. Like another way I could have worded that question is, how has Jesus been a stumbling block to you?
Yeah.
Because I don't think it's that he's always the precious cornerstone to those who believe and always a stumbling block necessarily. I mean, that in general, yes, he's a stumbling block to those who are unbelieving and a precious cornerstone to us who believe, but I still stumble over him when I want to go my own way, and he's like, no, don't do that, right? So I think that's an interesting way to think about it, how you just presented that. Yeah. Anyways, there's so much more that we could talk about, but we've taken a bit of your time. So we want to, if you have any thoughts in your life groups as you talk about this kind of stuff,
love the conversations that we get into. And so, hey, thanks for spending some time with us here on Coffee Talk this week. We look forward to seeing you Sunday, and if not, in the weeks ahead. And you know what? Just have a blessed week, and we'll connect soon.